Dozens killed and hundreds wounded in Sana'a. As President Saleh clings to power, the opposition is calling for an escalation of the mass protests against him. So where is Yemen headed? And is the Gulf brokered peace plan dead in the water? This is Inside Story. Hello there, warm welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. 2 days of violence in Yemen have left dozens of people dead and hundreds injured by bullets, batons and tear gas. Yet tens of thousands of protesters continue to call for President Ali Abdullah Saleh to go. But despite a deal brokered by the GCC countries, there's no end in sight to the upheaval. Saleh himself is in Saudi Arabia, still receiving treatment after his compound was attacked in June. And as the political deadlock continues, protesters are now calling for Yemenis across the country to gather day and night until his regime falls. Mariana Hond reports.
The scene inside a field hospital in Sana'a. Children were among the dead and injured as thousands returned to the streets and to the line of fire. These are the parents of a baby girl killed during the demonstrations.
These killers, God willing, they will pay the price for what they've done to people. What's the crime of a 10-month-old baby girl? We were out on a peaceful demonstration and they fired on us.
The crack of gunfire and the threat of army vehicles did little to deter protesters in the capital Sana'a. The violence had broken an uneasy, weeks-long stalemate. Many of those demonstrators are loyal to Ali Muhsin, a relative of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Ali Muhsin is the army chief and had supported the president for more than 30 years. But when 52 pro-democracy protesters were killed in these clashes back in March, he switched sides and joined the protesters. When thousands marched on Sunday calling for Saleh to step down, it was the president's special security forces who opened fire on them to deadly effect. Ali Muhsin has vowed that the regular army, soldiers who are under his control, will protect protesters in Sana'a. But there has been no sign of his forces during the latest clashes, perhaps a realization that armed resistance right now could be the catalyst for a full-blown civil war. Mariana Hond, Al Jazeera.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, so let me introduce today's guests. In London, Mohammed Kubati, he's the spokesman for the opposition's National Yemeni Council. In Washington, David Newton, the former US ambassador to Yemen. And in Jeddah, Hussein Shibokshi, a writer for Ashaq Al-Awsat newspaper. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Mohammed, let me start with you. Some opposition protesters are calling for an escalation in the protests against the government. Do you think that's a good idea? What will that achieve?
Well, I think that's not the right way to describe what's going on in Yemen. I mean, the protesters have been there in the streets for the past 7 months. They are frustrated. They are seeing that nothing is moving forward, and they have just tried to escalate their protest, peaceful demonstration. And that's what has happened. And what is confronting them is savageness, barbarianism, and massacres. I mean, what has been going on for the past 2 days, it's not less than any, indiscriminate genocide being perpetuated against peaceful demonstrators in the streets of Sana'a and Taiz, and it has been over the past, 7 months.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 days have been some of the worst violence that we've seen since protests started in Yemen back in January. Do you worry that this could escalate to such a degree that it turns into a civil war?
Well, I might remind you that people were thinking that there could be a sort of a political solution for the whole, standstill, which has been happening over the past 7 months. Unfortunately, people are now seeing that the regime is, as it has done over the past few months, it's just pushing forward. It's trying to dodge now. It's cornered. The regime is cornered for the dues of the GCC initiative, and the regime chose, to shoot people, kill them, so as to sort of run away from the requirements of the GCC initiative. I think that's what's happening. I mean,
OK, you've mentioned the GCC initiative there. Let's just remind our viewers what this is. The US, the EU and the UN are supporting the Gulf Plan, which includes 4 main points agreed as a roadmap. They include Ali Abdullah Saleh stepping down, transferring his powers to his deputy, elections to be held at the end of this year, the formation of a unity government chaired by the opposition, and the formation of a military committee to restructure the army. Now, in return for all this, Saleh would be granted immunity from prosecution. But to date, he has been reluctant to sign that deal. David, if I can come to you, I mean, this is a deadlock that's been going on for months now. I mean, to my knowledge, Saleh has backed away from signing this deal at least 3 times. Is there any sign of progress in this at all?
Well, there is at least sign in that there's going to be earlier elections, perhaps. But of course, the real issue is who will be the powers in the government. And President Saleh doesn't seem to be willing to let any of his relatives who control the military and security forces be replaced. And that, of course, particularly his son Ahmed, who heads the Republican Guard. This violence may be a show of military strength by Saleh's camp in order to put them into a stronger position. But this kind of violence, of course, is terrible. But it's, we've never had this kind of violence in Yemen before. It really is pretty horrifying.
He has recently signed over power to his vice president, given his vice president the authority to negotiate a deal on his behalf. Is that a positive step?
Well, it could be a start. The vice president has no independent power of his own. He's a southerner, entirely dependent on the government, which is dominated by northerners. So that if he can arrange with the opposition, that would be a help. But we're into other problems. We're almost into a blood feud between the Saleh family group and the Al-Ahmar family group, particularly Hamid Al-Ahmar, who obviously has ambitions to be president.
Now, the Ahmar family are another dynastic family who are rivals to the Saleh family. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, and under the old father who passed away a few years ago, there was kind of an unspoken deal between him and Saleh. But that was broken by the Ahmar sons with their ambitions. And Ali Abdullah Saleh seems to be doing his very best to make sure that they don't replace him.
Mohammed, just a quick word from you. You don't want another dynastic family to replace the Saleh family, do you?
No, these people, I know that they have got aspirations towards such, if it can be possible. But as far as I know, that both sides, both Al-Ahmars have offered to leave the country if Saleh, the remains of the regime, leave the country. And that was the beginning of the whole initiative. If you go back, David, I remind you that the American ambassador was there on early March in Sana'a, or late March, where Ali Muhsin Al-Ahmar said he would be leaving the country, and Ali Saleh came out and said, I would leave the country if Ali Muhsin leaves. And when Ali Muhsin agreed, as usual, Saleh would dodge and run away from such dues.
No, that's quite right. But I was speaking of the sons of Hussein Al-Ahmar, the former Speaker of the Parliament, not Ali Muhsin.
Okay, Hussein, let's take a regional...
Just only a sentence. Sadiq Al-Ahmar, David, had said that he is willing to live with his brothers. He will leave the country if the relatives of Ali Abdullah Saleh leave the country. He is on record saying that.
Okay, Hussein. Clearly, there's a lot of jostling for position going on. How worrying are the events in Yemen for surrounding countries? Because Saudi Arabia is particularly worried about the instability.
It's worrying, period. It's extremely alarming. It's a cause of concern for Yemen and for the Saudis and for the GCC as well. It's an explosive bomb that will reach everywhere once it's exploded. What we are seeing now is the ugly face of the succession program that has been orchestrated from father to son. It has been attempted in Iraq, it has been attempted in Egypt, in Libya, it succeeded in Syria. And we saw this in Yemen violently yesterday. Ahmed now, the son of Ali Abdullah Saleh, has taken over the events in Yemen. Everybody knows that Ali Abdullah Saleh physically is out of the country, and I think even politically so. So he is jogging for position, the son is, while at a very expensive and costly price tag at that. The vice president has been authorized to negotiate, but not to sign. This is the tricky part. He has been authorized to negotiate, not to sign. So he has really no authority or power to do anything for the moment. But we have seen yesterday the battle of the camel, as it was referred to in Egypt, signing off the last of the days of Mubarak. And I think we are seeing the same thing take place in Yemen today and yesterday. It is the battle of the finale as far as Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime is concerned.
Just how worried is Saudi Arabia? Because I don't know if you've seen them, but there have been some reports, some unconfirmed reports, that Saudi Arabia may have even sent some tanks and military equipment into Yemen to help suppress the popular uprising. Are you aware of those reports? Can you comment on them?
I am aware of these reports, but these reports have not been confirmed by the Saudi government. As you remember, when the Saudis did send troops to Bahrain with the GCC umbrella, they did declare it. I have to note that there are Saudi troops on the border of Yemen when they were facing the Houthis in the past. So that maneuvering might be a precautionary or defensive stance, not necessarily one entering into Yemen.
But so the Saudis must be very, very frustrated because they helped broker this GCC deal, and they've got Salah right there. He's in the country. Are they not putting pressure on him to step down?
I think they're putting a lot of pressure. I mean, if it was not for the Saudis, and I'll go on the record and say this, if it was not for the Saudis, Ali Abdullah Saleh would have been back in Yemen 2 months ago. The Saudis have basically put a strain on him to stay and remain until he surrenders power, but he has been playing a very dirty, tricky, wicked game, and the Yemenis on the streets are paying the price for that.
David, do you think the Saudis are doing enough? Because Saleh's there in their midst. Could they perhaps put more pressure on him to effect a peaceful transition of power?
I think the Saudis are trying very hard to play a positive role, but it's very difficult. He is playing a very tricky game with them. They have kept him from returning to the country. I think they really would like to see some kind of constitutional or semi-constitutional change of power, and they're trying to arrange that through the GCC mediation. But their ability is also limited in the face of the violence that's going on. This is something in the end that the Yemenis are going to have to work out for themselves. But
really? I mean, you think it's only an internal solution available? What about going to the UN? What about an external solution?
Well, diplomacy always helps, certainly, but I think this is turned pretty violent and is a struggle for power. And there's a limit to what any outside country can do, even including Saudi Arabia.
So you don't see a Libya scenario developing?
No, I don't. I don't think there's appetite in the West for another Libya-type operation. And it's the lines are not at all clear in Yemen. You've got many different people competing. I don't think anyone is going to intervene militarily.
What do you think, Mohammed? Should the UN get involved?
I would like to take an issue. Yes, I mean, we don't have to jump into just a sort of a military intervention. We haven't seen yet till now real pressure on the man. I mean, our brothers, the Saudis, know that they're dealing with a devious, untrustworthy, dishonest person, but we haven't seen any pressure, real pressure. We haven't seen any freezing of his assets till now. We haven't seen any embargo on weapons on this regime. I mean, the regime has not only been expecting weapons to arrive from Saudi, they have also received weapons through Sana'a airport a week ago from one of our from Russia. I mean, to speak truthfully, I mean, there haven't been till now real pressure on this regime. I mean, the international community cannot just turn a blind eye on such atrocities. I mean, these are crimes against humanity which are perpetuated by these criminals.
Why do you think that is, Mohammed? Why do you think the UN hasn't taken action, hasn't implemented embargoes or sanctions?
I don't know. I mean, we have been hearing that our friends in the West, the the Europeans and the Americans have sort of, passed this file to our brothers in the GCC area. And till now, we haven't seen from them real pressure on the man. The man has been playing, as Hussein said, he's been playing games with them. I mean, he is now calling the shots. I mean, by any means, it's not Ahmed who is now running these, fights in Sana'a. If the man really wanted to pass power to the vice president, he would have signed a decree, not for negotiation, signed a decree to pass power directly to the vice president, so we can move forward on the GCC initiative. But Ali Abdullah Saleh has managed to play a game on the GCC ministers. Just only the day before their meeting, he sent a letter to Abdul Latif al-Zayani, the Secretary General, telling him that he'll be signing the deal. But he did not. He never signed the deal. Now this is now calling for many, people are very much resented in the streets. They feel that our brothers in Saudi Arabia cannot continue just watching these atrocities and criminalities being committed by the regime, the remains of the regime, and the relatives of Ali Abdullah Saleh, who is there with them in Saudi. And he is still from there calling these shots. We hold him responsible for that, and we think that the international community have got to start. Today we were witnessing the movement of planes and helicopters over the area, hovering over the Change Square, and we think that we have got to move towards a ban on flights. We want a no-fly zone over Yemen, because these people
but
are
Mohammed, a no-fly zone could only be enforced militarily, and you're saying that you don't want to see military intervention.
Not intervention, yes, no-fly zone. I meant no military intervention on the ground, yes. But
a no-fly zone enforced in the air?
Yes, no-fly zone, they could, yes, on the air, yes.
Hussein,
we want to see other...
Let me get Hussein's reaction
to
this.
See other measures as
first
well.
Of all,
we want to see other measures.
Hussein, the first issue is that Mohammed is saying that that Ali Abdullah Saleh is playing a game with the GCC and that Saudi Arabia isn't doing enough to put pressure on him. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say that Ali Abdullah Saleh is playing a game. Saudi Arabia is putting pressure. Can it put more pressure? Yes, it can put more pressure. Everybody can say that. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of players who are playing games in Yemen. I mean, the Ahmars, the sons of the speakers, the former speaker of the parliament in Yemen, are playing some very tricky games. They were trying, mind you, they are, till a few days ago, they were part of the regime that they're asking to overthrow. And they are just as corrupt as Ali Abdullah Saleh, and they are trying to create havoc in the streets. So we have a lot of parties who want to take advantage of the situation, and they are igniting the streets, each for his own agenda.
What about Mohammed's second point? Why isn't there action by international community, sanctions, embargoes, no-fly zone imposed? What do you say to that?
Well, because I think Yemen is not looked at from the international community as a singular objective. They look at Yemen as the base for Al-Qaeda. They look at Yemen as the base of Al-Houthis, but they never look at it as one falling state that needs to be taken care of immediately. They look at it strategically as a playing field for the the war on terror, or the Houthis' escalation vis-a-vis the relationship with Iran. But they don't look at it as a corrupt regime that needs to be put on hold and to stop its killing against its citizens.
Okay, well,
Yemen is never looked at as a one-state solution.
Let's get the view from the US then, because this is clearly a tricky one for President Obama, isn't it, David? Because President Saleh, for all his faults, has been a stalwart ally alongside the US in the fight against Al-Qaeda, and that is something that the US has been prioritizing.
Well, that's true in the past, but he's a friend, I'm afraid, entirely from the past. The United States understands that he needs to go. I must say I sympathize with what Mohammed has said. I just don't think that the world community is going to intervene in any decisive way. It's not only that they only, as Hussein said, they only tend to look at it from the point of view of terrorism and Al-Qaeda. But when you look at Yemen's other problems beyond succession, they look overwhelming. the country is losing control over its territory. Its oil is running out. Its water is running out. Poverty is growing rapidly. You just wonder how this, unfortunately, sadly, I spent 7 years in Yemen and I'm very fond of it, but sadly, you just wonder how this country is going to survive. And I think many countries look at Yemen and they don't see any solutions. They look at the immediate problem of succession, and I agree, they have largely looked to the Gulf Cooperation Council, especially Saudi Arabia, to try to help and deal with the situation.
Okay, let's just have a look at another issue. Unusually, during the violence on Sunday, the authorities decided to keep the electric power switched on for most of the day, and that meant people were able to follow events on state television. And that broadcast some controversial views from alleged members of the public. Have a listen to this.
Look, brother, the Change Square should immediately be evacuated by force, regardless of the victims and whatever the cost may be. There are no youth there. Those whom you see are just the troops of the 1st Armored Division that have recently defected and joined opposition forces.
We shouldn't remain silent regarding what's going on. Those people are criminals, killers, butchers, and we're still offering concessions. But this is no longer wise, believe me. If the state started to implement the law, everyone would support it, including the silent majority.
David, let me just ask you, you've spent a lot of time in Yemen. What do you make of that last comment? Is there a silent majority? Does Salah and his family have still a lot of support?
Well, don't forget they've been in power for a long time. Quite a number of people have come to depend on them, including not just the military and security forces, but they've come to dominate a good bit of the economy. So they do have supporters of people who have an interest in the continuation of the regime. But I think it's quite clear that the silent majority would really like Salah to go. Don't forget there are demonstrations all over the country, Taiz, Hodeidah, many other places. So that, and what can you expect from state radio after all, other than broadcasting things favorable to Salah?
Mohammed, how important is it in this context that there are sections of the army, of the security forces, that have defected to the opposition, and that the opposition has the support of General Ali Mohsen? How important is that as you see these protests progressing?
I think that is the dangers of the next scenario, because I mean the country is sliding gradually towards total chaos and disintegration. And I would like to remind here both of my friends, Hussein and David, is the disintegration of Yemen, internal, fighting, conflict and so on, or openly full-fledged civil war, is that in the interest of our friends in Saudi Arabia and our friends in the West? I think Yemen is, the spillage of such a confrontation is going to affect both our brothers in Saudi and in the GCC region and the world at large. Yemen overlooks very important strategic tradeways, and I think that it's time for the international community to actually come to its obligations, because if we in Yemen only received 1 million Somali refugees, what do our brothers in the GCC expect once Yemen disintegrates? Are they ready to accommodate millions of refugees in the nearby borders, which were at one time disputed?
Okay,
so
let me bring in Hussein. We are coming to the end of the programme. Hussein, answer that point, and also whether you think that there is going to be any progress towards a final effective peace deal for Yemen.
You did save the best for last. I think this question is obviously the $6 million question. We need, everybody now is looking at that. There is an enormous resentment in Saudi Arabia publicly. The Twitters, the Facebooks, the journals, the newspapers are all against Ali Abdullah Saleh today. There is no room for a sympathetic response or a middle ground. There is a Saudi sentiment, a public Saudi sentiment, that the leadership in Saudi Arabia is hearing that Ali Abdullah Saleh has to go. And I think this will expedite a solution quickly for a peaceful transformation of power in Yemen as soon as possible.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave there. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much indeed for your time. In London, Mohammed Kubati, in Washington, David Newton, and in Jeddah, Hussein Shabokshi. And thank you to you at home for joining us. Do email us your thoughts at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But from me, Shuli Ghosh, bye-bye for now.